This is Midrash Tanchuma on Parshas Vayigash. So the Midrash starts with something very startling, very much in character with the Midrash. The Midrash says that when God gave us the Torah, God demanded that we produce an arev, right? Tenu arev shetekaymenu oso. Who is going to be the guarantor that you're going to keep the Torah? So several suggestions were given. The first one is the avot. That makes perfect sense, right? The avot are a major influence on the way we think and the way we live as a Jew. But that was rejected. Why? Because the Midrash cited several, what seems to us, very insignificant lapses in judgment. For example, Avram asked, how do I know that I'm going to inherit this land? And Yitzchak thought that perhaps he favored Esav over Yaakov until he learned the truth. And Yaakov himself was not quite certain what was going on after the whole anguish with Yosef. And then his children said, you have to bring down Binyamin to Mitzrayim. That's what this person asked for. And he was questioning the wisdom of that. And Hashem said, don't you realize that I'm running the show, that everything will turn out well? So this is the reason that the suggestion of the avot was rejected. The next suggestion was the Nevi'im. That makes perfect sense. The Nevi'im speak to us, not only through the pages of Tanakh, but their message is just as relevant today. But that was also rejected. Why? Well, there were psukim cited about many false Nevi'im among the prophets, so that was rejected. The final suggestion, which was immediately accepted, was our children. The Midrash says that as soon as God heard this, miyad kiblana kodesh baruch hu v'nasana Torah Yisrael. He immediately gave us the Torah. But it goes on to say, lefichach, because Yisrael mevatlim at the Torah, if we don't keep the Torah, kodesh baruch hu pareya min eravin. God is going to collect from those guarantors, namely our children. Shenemar, vatishkach Torah te'elkecha, eshkach banecha gam ani. If you forget the Torah, I will forget your children. What does that mean? Perhaps it almost sounds like assimilation. That God is saying, if you don't teach your kids will be forgotten. There is a parish on the Midrash, Anaf Yosef, also the Eitz Yosef, the same person, and he makes a very interesting observation about these three different possibilities. He says the first one, the avot, really means biology, DNA, father to son connection. That's maybe what could guarantee the Torah, right? But we know that's really not the case. You meet so many people who say, my grandfather was a rabbi. So the father to son line is not a guarantor. The next one that we said was Nevi'im, the prophets. He says that's really chinuch, education. Could that guarantee that we're going to keep the Torah, Jewish education? Well, unfortunately, not everyone gets a Jewish education. It's not always available, and maybe it's not always so good that everyone remains in the fold because of their experience with Jewish education. So finally, it's banecha, our children. And here comes a beautiful insight. Basically, what the Anaf Yosef is saying is what really drives parents, granted parents who are already keeping Torah values, what really drives them is not the avot and not the education, but their strong feeling that they want their children to continue with the same Torah values that they have. That very deep emotional concept is what drives parents to give their kids an education, to teach them at home what Judaism is all about. And that is what the Midrash meant when it said, Banecha. God accepted that because he knows that we, even if it's just those who are in a minority that are keeping the Torah, but those, they will understand and they will work very hard to make sure that their children continue in the same values. Because what is a Jewish value for religious parents? You know, there's a joke about these two women on Miami Beach. You know, what do they talk about? Of course, operations, their medical conditions, and their children. And one says, my son is so rich, he flies his own plane. The other one says, I can outdo that. My son is so rich, he spends $650 an hour to speak to a psychiatrist just to talk about me. Now, this is not a Jewish value. This is not paramount among Torah-observant parents as far as what they look upon as a success. Basically, the success is if they see their children continuing in the same derech as the parents, because then they know they've done their part in this great deal that was cut 3,000 years ago when God gave us the Torah. Have a great Shabbos.